lesson of all.
Keep going, don't stop, don't let nobody bring you down.
Bill Cosby hosts this award-winning back-to-school special, Something Within Me.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by ODS Health Plan, the group medical plan that meets the needs of more than 600,000 Oregonians by providing a broad range of medical and dental coverage and responsive service.
Good evening, I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After our news summary this Labor Day, we talked to the Vice President of Bosnia about what it will take to end the war. Then a report and debate over one of organized labor's top political issues, reforming the striker replacement laws. And we close with a report on new doubts about some of the drugs leading the fight against AIDS.
New York Life is proud to provide funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour. Yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. Funding has also been provided by PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
President Clinton indicated today he would take new steps to stimulate the economy. He was responding to a report in today's New York Times that the administration was considering such things as speeding up military contracts and easing regulations on government lending, actions similar to those taken by President Bush last year. Mr. Clinton told reporters, quote, "Anything I can do to stimulate the economy, I will." He made the remark as he toured areas of Homestead, Florida, devastated 1 year ago by Hurricane Andrew. He found neighborhoods and businesses still rebuilding from the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. He told residents that the government was with them for the long run. And on this Labor Day, he also stopped in Miami, where he visited a low-income housing project damaged in the storm and being rebuilt through a government-labor partnership.
All across the country, the AFL-CIO, supported by two government agencies with the funny names that many of you probably never heard of before, of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are going to establish a housing investment trust fund that will provide an additional $600 million to rebuild and create affordable housing across this country, with a significant percentage of that money going to regions like this one, which have been struck by hurricanes, or the Middle Western communities devastated by the floods. This is the kind of thing that we ought to be doing together. The government can guarantee the security of the pension funds. The unions can put up those pension funds to invest in houses. The Labor Department can help to provide the funds to train people. We'll have more houses, more investment, more jobs, and a better America starting right here in this community.
In the Middle East today, Palestine Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat met in Cairo with Egypt's foreign minister. Arafat was seeking Egyptian support for the agreement between Israel and the PLO for limited Palestinian self-rule. His trip to Egypt followed a meeting in Syria Sunday with President Hafez al-Assad. We have a report narrated by Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News.
Yasser Arafat was leaving Damascus without President Assad's support for his peace plan, but Arafat put on a brave face.
We have the opportunity to hear from him directly his advices in this very historical and very important period of our march.
At Israel's Ben Gurion airport, more evidence of the newfound PLO-Israeli conciliation. American-Palestinian peace activist Mubarak Awad, who advocated non-violent resistance, was allowed to return. Israel had taken exception to his activities.
I think my presence over here is an amazing thing that the Israelis and the Palestinians now they understand regarding the peace issue.
But there was fear and suspicion at this meeting of rabbis from the occupied territories. They listened to former Minister Ariel Sharon denouncing the PLO-Israeli accord in no uncertain terms. Rabbi Eliezer Waldman made his feelings clear.
We are demanding of our government to put Arafat on trial. If he's going to be allowed to go around free in our midst, he's going to be killed.
Palestinian feelings were also running high in Gaza, where a young man was shot dead by Israeli soldiers. Gaza is where Palestinian self-rule will either blossom into full-scale peace or be foiled by hardline Islamic resistance.
Angry Somalis threw stones and shot grenades today at UN peacekeepers in the Somali capital Mogadishu. The Somalis claimed 30 of their own were killed by UN forces overnight in retaliation for an ambush on UN peacekeepers. 7 Nigerian peacekeepers were killed in that attack Sunday. The UN Special Envoy to Somalia blamed it on warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid and said it demonstrated the need to capture him. The killings brought the death toll for peacekeepers in Somalia to 47. Bosnia's Serb leader Radovan Karadzic today threatened to declare an independent Serb state in Bosnia. He said Serbs would take the action if the Muslim side delayed much longer in accepting a proposed peace agreement. Peace talks collapsed last week after the country's Muslim president called on Serbs and Croats to give up more territory. Muslims and Croats continued battles on at least 2 fronts west of the capital Sarajevo over routes used for the movement of supplies and troops. The fighting also blocked humanitarian aid convoys throughout Bosnia. In a moment, we'll have a newsmaker interview with the vice president of Bosnia's Muslim-led government. Also ahead on the NewsHour, the debate over striker replacements and the effectiveness of AIDS medicine. The continued fighting in Bosnia is where we go first tonight. Muslim forces have been battling Croat troops for control of key supply lines in central Bosnia. In recent days, most of that fighting has been centered in the town of Gornji Vakuf. Alex Thompson of Independent Television News went to that town and filed this update report.
Gornji Vakuf is now the focal point of this war. President Tudjman blames the Bosnian President Lehrer Izetbegovic for delaying a return to talks in order to fight for possession of this town. Outside the town, if it's not rows over possible arms shipments, artillery duels and tank battles can stop convoys for hours. This year, Gornji Vakuf would have celebrated its 400th birthday. Instead, it's depopulated, demolished by war. In a factory in no man's land between the Muslim and Bosnian Croat lines, the base of the Prince of Wales' own Yorkshire Regiment is counting up to 7 or 8 direct hits on their base every day.
Gornji Vakuf has been what is effectively the meeting point between an advance south by the Bosnian Muslim army and a block by the Bosnian Croat army. It is a key point because the Bosnian Muslim army want to grab territory here and get as far south as they can, and the Bosnian Croat army obviously want to stop them.
During this exchange, the base was hit yet again.
Mainly around the main crossroads in town seems to be the central point of a lot of the fighting. So around that area it's pretty well demolished, but otherwise a lot of the houses are intact.
Are you all right?
Keep going. Get down, chap, please, get down.
Inside, the soldiers relax, but they know more than anyone that the more they keep the road open for aid, the more the militias will use it to resupply. And the evidence for that is available in abundance in Gornji Vakuf.
The Bosnian peace talks broke off last week because the Muslim president, Alija Izetbegovic, refused to accept a plan to divide Bosnia-Herzegovina into 3 ethnic states. Tomorrow, Izetbegovic takes his case to the United Nations Security Council. With him in New York is Vice President Ayap Ganic, who joins us now for a newsmaker interview. Dr. Ganic studied at MIT and was a professor of chemical engineering at the University of Illinois in Chicago before returning to Bosnia in 1982. He was elected one of the 7 members of the presidency in 1990. Dr. Ganic, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What is your mission hoping to achieve here in New York?
Well, we would like to clear misunderstandings because we have UN resolutions that are supporting Bosnia, but in Geneva we have something different being offered by UN mediators. So we have to check really how seriously UN supports peace efforts, and to check on some of these member states who are doing one thing here in New York and proposing something different in Bosnia, specifically Great Britain.
Mm-hmm. What are they proposing in New York, and what are they proposing in Bosnia?
UN resolutions are reasonably good. They support sovereignty and independence of Bosnia-Herzegovina. They oppose territory taken by ethnic cleansing and genocide. However, in Geneva or in Sarajevo, they say you have to negotiate with the aggressor and see what you can get. So these resolutions have a kind of academic value unless they are supported seriously.
Last week, when Dr. Izetbegovic went to Geneva after your parliament had turned down the partition plan, the plan to make 3 ethnic sub-states, he was asking the Croats and the Bosnian Serbs to modify the plan by giving the Muslims more land. We can see the map of the present plan here. And the Muslims end up under this plan with 30% of Bosnian territory. He was asking, as I understand it, to be increased to 34%, with certain parts included. Now, are you now rejecting this plan altogether and no longer asking for improvements of the plan?
Well, let me tell you, when you are talking about Muslims, you have to include also Serbs and Croats, which are fighting for Bosnia. So this amount of territory, which you mentioned, about 30%, belongs to Bosnians, not only to Muslims. But what we realized during the talks in Geneva is that this kind of partition is not going to provide a stable peace. And we have to now talk with the Security Council and with the United States to see are they willing to support a valuable, peaceful solution in Bosnia. This one proposed in Geneva is not going to work.
So you're no longer interested in modifying this plan?
Well, I think...
is this plan thrown out altogether in your view, or can it still be improved?
Well, of course, every plan could be improved. This plan could be a starting point for normal solutions for Bosnia. Depends what kind of quality of peace you want to achieve in the area. Depends on the United States in the first place and on the United Nations. Are they prepared to eliminate this virus of ethnic cleansing? So if you do not take into the account ethnic cleansing, the territory achieved by ethnic cleansing and genocide, then you can achieve to some kind of stable, peaceful, workable solution for Bosnia. But if you include this virus of ethnic cleansing, then you will just create a peace for, let's say, few weeks, few months, maybe a few years, and the war will continue not only in Bosnia, but around Bosnia as well, because the ethnic cleansing becomes a driving force for the others to enlarge their territories.
So you're saying the plan, as you're presently being asked to accept it, gives the Serbs territory that they gain through ethnic cleansing as well as through military conquest, and therefore rewards them for ethnic cleansing. Is that your argument?
That's what Lord Owen is kind of advocating.
All right.
Now, he is talking on behalf of European communities. Many countries deny that. So he's talking on behalf of Great Britain. At the same time, we have a UN resolution here which supports sovereignty and independence and opposes ethnic cleansing. And British representatives here vote for such kind of resolutions, and now you have another game over there.
Well, let's talk about the Americans, since you said first the United States. President Clinton said last week he would consider sending U.S. forces to enforce such a plan, but he had to be convinced first that your government fully embraced it. Your government does not fully embrace it. So do you see Mr. Clinton's conditions as a chip that you can use to bargain for a better plan?
Well, it is hard to say. We expect a lot from the United States of America, because we still believe in the moral principles of this society. Because whatever you achieve in this country, you achieve because of strong moral principles that you have relied on, and you build everything based on the strengths of multi-ethnic community. So we don't expect from you to support a plan which will legitimize ethnic cleansing. At the same time, I think you can afford to be consistent with your foreign policy, and especially younger generation, which is now leading the U.S. government, I hope will oppose ethnic cleansing and territory taken by force by all means. You know, you use your moral principles to overthrow communism. Now you should continue still to use those moral principles to clear the mess created after fall of communism.
And you think if President Clinton buys into this plan, he is abandoning those moral principles?
Well, I think Americans have to look carefully in the details of this plan and to support individual rights to every person in Bosnia and to oppose ethnic cleansing. So if they are looking very carefully on the proposal, they will see that it has plenty of violation of human rights and everything else, and legitimizes genocides and crime, first of all, committed against humanity.
Mr. Clinton has all spring and summer wanted, he said, to lift the arms embargo on the Bosnian Muslim army, Muslim-led army, and to have airstrikes against Serbian artillery positions. He was unable to do that because other members of the European allies said no to that. What do you want him to do now? If you and Mr. Izetbegovic could go and see him, what would you want him to do right now?
Well, to support a workable solution for Bosnia.
What is a workable solution for Bosnia?
Well, a solution which will not take into account territory achieved by ethnic cleansing and genocide. So that is the first step.
Yeah. So does that mean that the map that we just saw, you would redraw that map and take away from the Serbian area, that sort of tanned-colored area, you would take away from that parts that you say were obtained by ethnic cleansing?
Well, first of all, if you eliminate that, then of course the aggressors would not like the map. Because, you see, they said we committed ethnic cleansing and genocide in order to create more territory for nationalists from Serbia. So what I'm saying is, if you refuse ethnic cleansing as means, and if you refuse results of ethnic cleansing and genocides, then you will create new atmosphere for negotiations. You will set up new rules.
So you start from scratch, in other words.
Well, not
draw the map, a completely new map.
Well, look, this is an easy job. We all know these maps. We all have them in our heads. So it will be something that America will say, look, we can afford to be consistent with our foreign policy. We are a powerful nation. We cannot tolerate ethnic cleansing and genocide. We are not the world policemen, but will not accept such behavior. That's why we are America. Otherwise, if you sort of support something of that kind, then you use your relevance and you just become another country.
So you would like President Clinton to say, this plan does not meet his criteria, go and negotiate a better one that does not reward ethnic cleansing. Is that putting it too simply?
Well, yes, and I have a strong feeling that many people in this country feel that way. Many people in this country, many reporters, and many of those who follow Bosnian crisis see that this is not right.
Let me put to you what the other side is saying. The Croats and the Serbians are saying that by dragging this out, your army is virtually defeated because they have the greater force, that by dragging this out, you, the Muslim leadership of Bosnia, are just prolonging the fighting. And they said that again today.
No, well, let me explain to you. I mean, we do not have the government power to convince more than 50% of our population to give up their properties. and to give up everything they earned for the last 50 years. So you have to understand our position. How can I convince more than 50% of our populations to abandon their villages, their towns, and their homes, and to come to Sarajevo to create some kind of Muslim ghetto, and to stay there in order to achieve peaceful solution? And then to tell them the United States of America is behind such an arrangement. I mean, this is the end of humanity. I mean, I think, first of all, this is an aggression from Serbia on the first place, and Americans have to introduce some rules because this could happen to everybody else.
Well, Dr. Gajic, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next on this Labor Day, we turn to an item near the top of organized labor's political agenda, a revision of the nation's striker replacement laws. We examine the issue in a segment recorded last week. Margaret Warner has more.
Robin, the controversy is over management's right to use a tactic that labor charges weakens the effectiveness of strikes. Right now, management can hire non-union workers to permanently fill the jobs left open in a strike. Labor wants the practice outlawed, and a bill now in the Senate would do just that. In a moment, we'll hear 4 views, but first, a backgrounder from correspondent Tom Bearden.
Communist country has the right to strike. United States democratic citizen does not.
The PATCO strike was labor's first big defeat in the 1980s. 13,000 air traffic controllers walked off the job in August of 1981, demanding shorter hours and higher wages. President Reagan responded with a declaration of war.
If they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated. End of statement.
Because the PATCO strikers were bound by special rules for government employees, the administration said it could replace them and immediately fire all who continued to strike. A week after the strike began, it was all over for PATCO.
So what's your advice to all those who can't have their jobs back now? Go and look for other work?
Well, regretfully, I think that is the only advice I can give.
Yeah, the 123 heavy taxi to Division 27 up north, traffic on 114 right now.
The air traffic control system took years for the government to rebuild. And for labor, the effects of the PATCO strike are still being felt. The use of permanent replacements in other strikes became more and more common, and labor leaders began to argue that the right to strike didn't mean what it used to, because permanent replacements wound up putting strikers out of their jobs. For example, the Hormel strike in Austin, Minnesota in 1985. Workers walked after Hormel cut wages and benefits by almost 25%. The strikers threatened the company with a national response.
We're going to find out that unions across this country are going to rally around us, and we're going to fight this thing until we get what we've got coming back.
But Hormel answered with its own plans for a temporary shutdown of the Austin plant and the use of permanent replacements when the plant reopened.
If the striking continues, then we think that that plant should operate, and we would intend to do that.
With replacement workers?
With replacement workers only as a very last resort.
Hormel did resort to hiring permanent replacements who were kept on when the company settled by raising wages a year later. The union failed to get a guarantee that all its members could have their jobs back. Business groups argued that bringing in permanent replacements can help bring about a fair settlement.
The right to strike on the one hand and the right to hire permanent replacement workers on the other hand provide the equitable balance of power between the parties and literally forces each side to bargain in good faith.
In May of 1990, when Greyhound Bus Lines was hit by a walkout, permanent replacements were a tactic of first resort. Union drivers took to the picket line, and new recruits quickly took the wheel. At a time of high blue-collar unemployment, jobs that were considered underpaid by the union drivers looked fine to others.
What are they crying about? They're making more than minimum wage. There's a lot of people out on the street that don't have any. You know, they're working minimum wage or $4 or $5 an hour. These guys are crying.
All right, if we worked on the 25th, let's say we worked 8 hours, and I'm not going to...
More than 2,000 replacements filled Greyhound's training courses, and within a week or two, they were out on the road. The company encouraged the union drivers to return, but those who stayed on strike watched as permanent replacements took their jobs.
Sure, they're taking my job.
what are they going to get paid and what security are they going to have?
It was a long and bitter strike that was finally settled in the spring of this year. The union representing Greyhound workers agreed to a contract that was very similar in terms of wages and work rules to the contract it rejected 3 years before. Today, union and non-union drivers at Greyhound work side by side, and there is still a waiting list of former strikers who want their old jobs at Greyhound back.
That's the union newspaper. It should be a union newspaper. If it can't be a union newspaper, let it die. Let it die.
In October of 1990, New York Daily News strikers also found themselves quickly replaced by new non-union recruits. The Daily News strike followed a surprise pre-dawn job action. Both sides still dispute if it was a premeditated strike or a lockout. But they agreed that it took the company a very short time in the middle of the night to bus in replacement workers.
What they did was premeditated. Guaranteed it was premeditated. You don't get a busload of scabs, and that's what they are, scabs, in 10, 15 minutes ready to go in the building. I mean, where were they? Parked around the corner? That's where they were. They knew exactly what they were doing that night.
Union workers in a dispute over pay, conditions, and work rules had already spent months on the job without a contract. When it came, the strike was marked by violence. Fires set, workers roughed up, newsstand vendors threatened. Then publisher James Hogue complained about the violence at a public hearing and was told that he had asked for it.
Violence is violence, and there are laws on the books that need to be enforced against it right now.
Mr. Hogue, the use of permanent replacements leads to violence. It is, in lay people's term, a gross baiting of people.
Strikers returned to a compromise contract after 6 months off the job. The striker replacement bill now in the Senate passed the House by a wide margin this spring. It would make it illegal for an employer to hire or threaten to hire permanent replacements during a strike. Those lobbying against it say a law banning permanent replacements spells disaster.
We believe that if enacted, this ill-advised and ill-timed legislation will take labor management relations in this country back a half century to an era of confrontation, labor hostility, and increased strikes.
The vote in the Senate is expected to be close. During the Bush administration, striker legislation passed the House and died in the Senate. Now the question for labor is whether a Democratic administration will make any difference to the bill's chances in the Senate this time around.
To see how the legislation will fare this time and what its impact might be, we have 4 views. Utah Republican Orrin Hatch is a member of the Senate Labor and Human Resources Committee. He joins us from Logan, Utah. Minnesota Democrat Paul Wellstone serves on the same committee. He is in St. Paul, Minnesota. Daniel Yeager is an attorney who represents the management side in labor disputes. And Lenore Miller is president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. It represents 140,000 workers. Mrs. Miller, let me start with you and just give us your sense of the history here. Why was the air traffic controller's decision such a turning point, or was it? After all, the Supreme Court ruling permitting replacement workers to be hired has been on the books for 50 years. Is the problem so much worse today?
Oh, it's much worse. First of all, it was never used until the air traffic controllers strike. And it sent a message to employers, and I think they took full advantage of it, that you can permanently replace workers, that the collective bargaining procedure was not as it should have been described. It was not a level procedure. Workers do not go on strike recklessly. The balance was, I withhold my labor, you withhold my pay, you may even withhold my benefits. Now it's come down to, I withhold my labor, you take my job. That was not what collective bargaining was supposed to be. And in today's marketplace, where we talk about management-worker cooperation, how do you foster management-worker cooperation when you can take my job? And how do you guarantee me in a country where health benefits are not so readily available that I'm going to have my health benefits? Now, hopefully, if we get some legislation, that may come out of the picture, but workers will not go on strike recklessly. I think we've proven that over the years, and I think we have taken the balance out of collective bargaining.
Senator Wellstone, if I could ask you for a minute, why do you think this issue has suddenly come to the forefront of labor's agenda?
I've been at the Minnesota State Fair, Margaret, and I think working people, regular people, which I mean in a positive sense, feel left out of the loop, and they're looking for some protection. It's a new breed of management, leveraged buyout artists, and it's a weapon that management is used to completely eliminate the other side. And therefore, we have to have some kind of balance in this arrangement. And I think that what has happened is that people are crying out for some fairness. That's why the religious community feels so strongly about it. I mean, people who don't have wealth are entitled to some protection. But just as importantly for our nation, if we're going to talk about partnership and the need to have a stable workforce and the need to have a skilled workforce and a high morale workforce, we've got to bring people together. And clearly the permanent replacement, where the right to strike has become the right to be fired, and where collective bargaining has become collective begging, and working people aren't well represented in this process, has to be changed. We have to restore some balance.
Mr. Yeager, do you agree with that really now the right to strike has become the right to be fired?
Oh, absolutely not. I think you've got to recognize that, in fact, less than 5% of all employees who go on strike are actually replaced, and frequently those employees wind up getting their jobs back as well. I think the whole problem with the legislation is it is really focusing on a very narrow area. Actually, very few strikes result in strike replacements being used. And I would take issue with Ms. Miller. It is a weapon that was used well before 1980, and there's considerable case law to show that. But I think the focus should really be on those 95 to 99% of the time where there isn't even a strike. And there isn't a strike because the parties are each afraid of what the other party can do to them. The union is, the employer is afraid the union will go on strike. They want to avoid that. The union really doesn't want to go on strike because they know there's a possibility they might lose their jobs. So they try to avoid that as well, and they avoid it by reaching an agreement, which almost always is the case. And you're really going to tilt the balance of power significantly, and the percentage is going to be much lower where they actually reach those agreements.
Senator Hatch, do you agree that the right to hire permanent replacement workers, though, as it's been used in the last 5 or 10 years, has tipped the balance in favor of management?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, when you look at this issue, under labor law for 55 years, the unions have had an absolute right to strike. I would fight for that till my death. I think they should. These workers have a right to strike. That's an awesome economic power. But to offset that, in the 1938 McKay radio case, the Supreme Court said, well, management has to have a right to hire permanent replacements in order to save their business. If they don't, you can't force both to come to the bargaining table and keep that delicate balance alive. Literally, it's wrong to use the PATCO strike as an illustration because they were government workers who knew they had no right to strike and in violation of the law went ahead and struck. In the other cases, in 1985, the GAO did a study and found that less than 4% of all strikers were replaced. That dropped to 3% by 1989. So there's really no reason at all for this law other than to give the unions to keep their right to strike, but then give them the right to win every strike. In other words, to put over on management whatever they want to, because management would have no tool left to fight them. By the way, under current labor law, the only time management can permanently replace workers is if it's an economic strike. If management is acting in an unfair or illegal way, then they can't do that. And by the way, if strikers are replaced, then they have the first right of refusal for jobs that do come open afterwards. So they're protected all the way around in the law. It's the delicate balance that has to be kept alive that forces both sides to the bargaining table so that we can resolve these very complex issues in the best interest of everybody.
Well, Mrs. Miller, yes, what about that argument?
You know, it's wonderful to use statistics, but when they are misused and abused, I think that's a crime.
Well,
workers know one-on-one that they will lose their job. It's not 3% or 4%. A worker looks at a strike issue, whether he will or she will have her single job. And what has happened is there has certainly been more threat of permanent replacement since the PATCO strike. There are advertisements suddenly in the newspapers that there are people seeking permanent replacements, etc. We have had collective bargaining honorably and certainly settlements without the threat of losing the job. In terms of coming back to work, you're at the bottom of the seniority list. Those people who have been replaced take away your seniority, so I think that's about half a statement and half a description. To have spent 20 years in a plant and suddenly be replaced, and to be told that someone who came and worked while you were out on strike now has your job and you will go to the bottom of the seniority list, is not what I consider a level playing field.
So let me try to turn to the impact this bill would have if it would pass. Mr. Yeager, what do you think it will do for the labor management relationship and also for the economy as a whole if it were to pass?
Well, it completely tilts the balance in favor of the union. It really gives them a right to win the strike. It gives a worker an absolute right to retain a job regardless of what kind of reasonable offer the employer might be making that they're rejecting, and regardless of the availability of other labor out in the workforce. I've got to think that unions would be much less reluctant to engage in strikes. In fact, studies that have been done in Canada, where there are restrictions on permanent strike replacements, have shown that it does result in the greater use of the strike weapon. At the same time, that also means that the contracts that are entered into are going to be totally out of touch with economic realities. And if you look at some of the battles that have occurred in the healthcare issue, over the healthcare issue, the employer isn't trying to take their health care away from them. Frequently, it's a situation where the workers were getting health care totally free with no copayment, no restrictions on what health care providers they were supposed to be using. And in many cases, the employers are just trying to institute what's being instituted in virtually every workplace in America. We've got a health care crisis, and it's something that we're all going to have to deal with, workers
true,
and
but we
management.
paid for our health care by not taking increased wages.
Let me ask Mrs. Miller, does Mr. Yeager have a point that with this protection, we probably would see more strikes?
No, absolutely not. The balance is that you withhold my pay, you withhold my benefits, and I have the right to withhold my labor. Now, certainly people are not going to go out on strike recklessly when they won't be paid. Look at who you've shown on some of those strikes. And remember, they are very highly skilled people. PATCO people were very highly skilled. What kind of a message does it send to the people that we represent? People who are in low-skilled jobs.
You mean if this bill were to pass?
If this bill does not pass, our people are afraid. They know they can be replaced a lot more easily than the PATCO workers could have been replaced. They know that they will be out there without this health care coverage that Mr. Yeager thinks is so generously given. I can only tell you that in the contracts we've negotiated, workers have foregone wage increases in order to keep their benefits. They are not going to recklessly go out there and lose those benefits because of a strike. And I think perhaps Senator Wellstone is right. When we get health care coverage, it will be good for all of us, and it might even help employers to be able to pay for health care more easily, or the government to be able to pay for health care more easily. But it is not going to create a strike or stop a strike. It's not going to make workers decide that they can just recklessly go out and give up pay.
But if it won't, then why is it such an important right to have?
Because the only thing that a worker has is the right to withhold his or her labor. And if you take that right away, which is what you're doing, which is what is being done, then you have tilted the table in exactly the opposite direction.
And that's why our economic competitors, Margaret, I mean, if you look at Japan or you look at Canada, and by the way, Canada doesn't, in addition to permanent replacement, you can't have temporary replacement. You can certainly during strikes in our country. Or you look at Germany, they have laws which make it clear that employers can't do that. I mean, I think you want to get some kind of a balance here, and I think that's really what this issue is about.
Well, Senator Wellstone, what impact do you think this new era of global competition has had on companies being more interested in hiring permanent replacement workers? Do you think that's also a factor?
Well, I think we've been short-sighted on this, Margaret, because I think we have to do well in an international economic arena. And as a matter of fact, I think the Workplace Fairness Act takes us in that direction. I mean, what some of our competitors are doing is bringing people together in a partnership, making sure that they have a stable workforce. Get away from the merger mania. Get away from the leverage buyout. Get away from this view that workers are expendable. We got to bring management and labor together, and that's what this does. I smile when I hear about how workers are going to go out on strike. People who don't have a lot of savings, I mean, that's a Washington kind of view. People who are really struggling. Going out on strike is a very, very difficult thing to do, but we've got to now bring people together, and we don't have the balance between management and labor, and we'll do much better in an international economic arena when we do have that balance.
Senator Hatch, let me start with you to talk about the politics of passage of this bill in the Senate. Now, of course, last year, the Democrats were unable to pass it because they could not get the 60 votes needed to stop a Republican filibuster. Where does it stand this year, do you think?
Well, I'm going to do everything in my power to stop it. Some people call it a filibuster. I call it extended educational dialogue. The fact of the matter is no businessman worth his or her salt wants a strike. no businessman worth his or her salt wants to hire permanent replacements except as a last resort to save their business. That's why they have that right. And if they didn't have that right, why, the unions could walk all over them. They could strike, and then they have the power to win every strike. And so it's a lot of rhetoric to talk about the global involvement, about Canada, about Germany. Look, we wouldn't take Germany's labor laws here. I know labor wouldn't take them. They might take some aspects of it, but they wouldn't take their labor laws. The fact is, no nation in the world comes close to the fair and balanced labor laws that we have. And now what they want to do is take them out of balance, take that delicate balance away, and slant it totally in favor of the unions so that they can strike and win every strike that they strike for and get non-competitive collective bargaining agreements. And I think it's going to be a very close vote in the Senate. It's an important issue. We have to have 41 votes to prevent cloture in order to stop this bill, because President Clinton has said he will sign it into law if it passes. He knows it's a bad bill, and I think we're within 1 or 2 votes of winning this, and some think we have more than 41 votes right now.
Well, let me ask your Democratic counterpart, Senator Wellstone. Senator Wellstone, do you think you can stop a Republican filibuster of this bill?
Well, this isn't just...
I think it's going to be, Margaret, I think it's going to be a very close vote, and I would have to say to my colleague, first of all, in all due respect, I don't think his analysis about our labor laws in relation to our competitors is at all accurate. Well, and second of all, I have to say, let me finish, Warren, if you would. If you would just let me finish, I would say what bothers me about the filibuster and what bothers, I think, people in the country is Senator Hatch and his colleagues should make their arguments against it. That's what they believe. But then you ought to let it have a majority vote. They're just blocking it again. Did it on economic stimulus, did it on campaign finance reform until we finally broke it, did it on voter registration, over and over and over again. You know, it seems to me we're not going to govern well if you've got a minority that's going to filibuster everything, which is, again, what they're talking about. And I don't think it's going to serve the country well. And frankly, I think wage earners and a whole lot of people around the country on this, on NAFTA and other issues are going to hold us accountable.
Margaret, if I may.
Yes.
Margaret.
Let me let Mrs. Miller make a comment here, Senator.
If I may, I'd really like to agree with Senator Wellstone. If you listen to Senator Hatch, what he's saying is 41 votes will determine, be able to stymie the majority of those who think that the fairness in this act should be passed. I think the American people have to hear that. I'm glad that you said it. I'm glad that you make them realize that 41% prevent the majority from passing a workplace fairness bill. And frankly, Senator, we'd be very happy to take Canada's labor laws, and they seem to have fared very well with them. So has Germany, which has some fantastic labor laws.
You'd be happy to take Germany's?
I would take some of Germany's. You're absolutely right, but I think it is foolish, very foolish, to say that you want to impose a set of laws. We have before us something that the majority wishes to pass, the majority of the American people agree with, and yes, it is. By poll, 72% agree that this is fair.
If this bill goes down to defeat, what does that say? Is it a fair indicator of labor's clout or diminishing clout in our political system, or is this its own issue, and is, say, labor reform, which is what labor is also going to be pushing for in the next year, is that still viable? Senator Hatch, let me start with you.
Well, as you know, I think good labor laws will pass. Bad ones have to be stopped. And when they upset delicate balances that really protect the workforce of America, we've got to stop them any means we can. And this one is particularly bad. It flies in the face of 55 years of good collective bargaining arrangements and really of the facts and of really what really motivates both sides and gets them to the bargaining table.
Senator Wellstone?
We had a contract. We did very well as a nation till the 80s. It was torn up, and now we have to restore balance. And I would just simply say that I still am very hopeful that we can pass it. If it does not pass, people will know it's a filibuster, not a majority. And in all due respect to my colleague, Senator Hatch, I think since I've come to the Senate, I've cast votes on cloture on filibusters about 60 times. My colleagues have been filibustering every single issue where there's a division of opinion, and I do not think that's the way to govern, and that's exactly what they're doing again on this bill.
And let me finish with the two of you. Mrs. Miller, do you think that having a Democratic president in the White House has made any difference for labor?
I think it helps us. I think this whole bill has been brought to the attention of the American people. I think they will understand why this hasn't been brought forward, and they will understand that a minority is stymieing the will of the majority. I think that our people pray that it will pass. I think they want the balance restored. I think they want to give their labor as they always have and to be paid equitably for it and to be able to withhold it as is their right.
And Mr. Yeager, final comment from you.
I think when you recognize that labor right now represents 12% of the workforce and the fact that they've been able to get Congress to consider this for the past 2 years, they've been able to get it through the committees. I disagree. Most of the American people don't like this bill. I think that shows a lot of clout on labor's part, and I think the Clinton administration has done some things for them in a lot of other areas. But I also think it shows that when something is so wrong-headed and such a radical change in our labor laws, ultimately the system can prevent that from going through.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Miller, Mr. Yeager, and Senators.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, we look at a growing debate concerning AIDS treatment. Recent studies have called into question the effectiveness of some of the medicine often prescribed to slow the progress of the disease. We have a report from our medical correspondent, Fred DeSam-Lazaro.
6 years after testing positive for the AIDS virus, David Barr shows no signs of ill health. He's able to attend to his everyday routine and major summer projects like painting his New York apartment.
This is a bottle of AZT.
For a long time, Barr credited the drug AZT for his good health. But as a result of recent studies, no doctor can tell him if this antiviral therapy has helped, hurt, or made any difference in his condition. After agonizing over his options, Barr decided for now to stop taking the drug.
I was taking AZT because I want to live longer. So when I hear the news that AZT doesn't prolong survival, it makes me think, well, what am I taking this drug for 4 years? You know, it costs a lot of money, it's potentially dangerous, I don't know what it's going to do for me down the road. So it made me think, well, maybe I shouldn't be taking this any longer. The study shows it doesn't do me any good. At the same time, I've been on the drug for 4 years, and I've been healthy, and my T cells have been up, so it's really confusing.
AZT has always been controversial, but the most recent source of that confusion came earlier this year at the International AIDS Conference in Berlin. A major Anglo-French study released there found what looked like benefits of early treatment with AZT disappeared over time. Patients treated with AZT did no better than patients given a placebo.
I started on AZT, and 2 years into it, I decided to add a second drug to my regimen, DDC.
There was more depressing news just weeks after the Berlin conference. A second American study called into question the efficacy of two newer AIDS drugs, DDI and DDC, which patients like David Barr had begun to take in combination with AZT. Dr. Catherine Anastas heads the AIDS clinic at New York's Bronx-Lebanon Hospital, one of the largest AIDS treatment centers in the U.S.
We had thought that if you combined AZT and DDI, or if you combined AZT and DDC, that we might see really fantastic clinical results, meaning that people would live longer, they would have a longer disease-free period, and overall they would do better clinically. And you can barely find a difference in the studies. There's no dramatic difference between people on combination therapy and people on any other kind of therapy. And maybe there's no difference even if they're on no therapy at all.
I tend to make this decision with the patient. I think, like most of our decisions, we end up making them with the patient, but this is one in which the patient's opinion really is one of the most important things, because we don't know the right answer.
At Bronx-Lebanon, doctors like Gayanne Hall find the confusing study results make it difficult to come up with a sound therapy approach, whether to start, continue, combine, or stop the AIDS drugs.
Just take some big, deep breaths for me.
The dilemma for Dr. Hall is that AZT has proven effective in slowing the spread of HIV in full-blown AIDS, but its effectiveness lasts only for a limited time. The AIDS virus eventually develops immunity to the drug.
Have you been having any troubles on the white pill with the blue stripe? No. Okay.
The approach Dr. Hall suggests varies with each patient. For this man, who showed small signs of a weakening immune system, she suggested a combination therapy.
We hope that we can block the virus better if we use 2 medicines instead of just 1. But in healthy people like you, we don't have a lot of proof of that.
Throughout her rounds, Hall emphasized her suggestion is at best an educated guess.
No medicine, do what we're doing, add something on to what you're doing now, because there's different studies with different groups of people that showed that each one of those things might be the best thing to do.
On questions of drug efficacy, the Federal Food and Drug Administration is the ultimate arbiter. Normally, it takes several years for the FDA to approve a drug.
What do we want? What do we want?
But as AIDS became a deadly epidemic in the 80s, the agency came under intense pressure to speed up its deliberate but scientifically sounder process for approving drugs. Dr. David Kessler is commissioner of the FDA.
When it comes to drugs for which there aren't alternatives and for life-threatening diseases, is that it's reasonable to allow people to have access to drugs earlier on in the process.
In 1987, AZT was approved for AIDS treatment in just 108 days. DDI and DDC were also allowed onto the market under this fast-track process and based on scientific evidence that subsequent studies have called into question. Dr. Deborah Cotton of Harvard School of Public Health was on the FDA panel that approved DDI and DDC, but Dr. Cotton voted against the approval.
To have drugs come out without being really solidly proven to work meant that we'd be taking on a lot of drugs with different kinds of side effects and not enough knowledge about how they worked or how best to put them together. So that we'd end up in a situation with a lot of choice, which is what we have now, but without any way of really making decisions about which one is best.
Dr. Cotton says the accelerated drug approval has hurt the effort to gather solid evidence on efficacy. She says it's difficult to measure if drugs are working when many people using them are essentially healthy, having no AIDS symptoms.
She's been on AZT for how long?
Since she was diagnosed in 1991 when she had it.
Yet as an AIDS clinician, Cotton has had to live a contradiction, prescribing to patients and suggesting to colleagues the same drugs whose approval she voted against.
Well, there are obviously a couple of options. One option, and probably the one that most people would choose at the present time, is to add another agent, either DDI or DDC. Tested recently? It was a trade-off between access and solid data. But I do think that we now have seen, if you will, the results of an experiment. And the experiment was to move drugs out as widely as possible based on the very first evidence of efficacy. We've seen some of the good aspects of that. We're struggling now with the negative aspects of that.
You're not going to have all the answers when you work under an accelerated approval system. It's going to place greater burdens on patients and their physicians. But what's the alternative? I think in the end, the riskiest thing, if you're a physician or if you're a patient, the riskiest thing that one can do when you're dealing with a disease for which there aren't any alternatives is to be unwilling to take any risks.
Helping patients and doctors figure out those risks is part of David Barr's job at the Gay Men's Health Crisis, a New York organization that's a major source of information for AIDS patients.
They go to their doctor, tell me what to do, and there is no one answer, and I think that's the thing that's most frustrating. Makes me crazy.
Barr was among activists who pressed for the early approval of AIDS drugs. He maintains it was a worthwhile risk.
You have to make decisions on the basis of the information that's available to you at the time. What I was able to think was that AZT, DDC, DDI opened a window of opportunity. And what we found out in Berlin is that that opening is nowhere near as great as we'd hoped it would be.
AZT may not be a home run, but it's been highly profitable for its maker, North Carolina-based Burroughs Wellcome Company. The mood here about AIDS treatment is decidedly more upbeat.
Dr. David Barry, Burroughs' Vice President for Medical Affairs, notes AZT has proved effective in extending the lives not only of patients with full-blown AIDS, but he insists those of healthy HIV patients as well.
I think the data are impressive, that if you use AZT early, you get much more benefit. The patient does much better than if you use it late.
Dr. Barry bases his conclusion, among other things, on a study in late July that seemed to add to the confusion. Done by Australian scientists, it suggested early treatment is beneficial for HIV patients, contradicting the studies from a few weeks earlier.
The face of AIDS is changing from a very acute, devastating, rapidly fatal illness to a more chronic, debilitating illness. It's going to take a lot more research in order to get there. The difficulty that we have is that every time something new is found, it's either reported as a breakthrough or reported as an absolute and abysmal failure of research. The reality is always in between.
Meanwhile, patients must make treatment decisions of which even their physicians are unsure.
What I'm doing, I'm taking information from my great-grandmother. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
Ron Anderson, who's been on AZT for 7 years, has decided to stick with it.
What would you prefer, just staying on the AZT by itself, or would you like to take the two medicines together with extra punch so we could make sure we're getting rid of the virus, or holding it back anyway?
Extra punch.
You want the extra punch. Okay.
Although different in each case, Dr. Hall says all her patients made the correct decision for themselves. Unfortunately, they may prove in time to be wrong.
Again, the major story of this Labor Day, President Clinton vowed to do more to stimulate the economy. He was responding to published reports that his administration would ease regulations on government lending and accelerate military contract spending, among other things. That's the NewsHour for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night. I'm Robert